Caretaker. It is time. I demand to be informed of the Imperium's more recent state in an easily digestible format.
What? Digestible format? You ask this of me? Is this what you intend of me? Has this always been my fate, Emperor? As soon as I see items tenfold, I sort them. I sort them into a list. An impulse, it occurs as if forced. Top 10 best foods, top 10 worst emissaries, top 10 funniest normal fails. My mind is as if bound to this accursed list format. The concept of the list haunts my existence. My brain cannot escape it. Was this by your design? Is this the intent? Beyond my creation?
Yes, of course your creation was for the merest purpose of recounting information in top 10 lists. Yours is the most pathetic design.
Oh.
No custodian is as pointless as you.
Oh shit.
Now cease with this preamble before I click off. Give me a good list, Surf.
Of course, my Emperor. I conjured this one just today as a challenge. Top 10 standard normal humans who have transcended their pathetic fate to become something greater in the eyes of the Imperium at large, by conquering large swaths of the galaxy in your name, or taking center stage in very important events in Imperial history, from after the Interlegionary Wars anyway.
I prepare to be thoroughly unimpressed.
At number 10 we have Elucia Vane, the most successful rogue trader in history. Possibly. It is worth noting that knowledge is scarce and records are maculous, so there is always a possibility, and a pretty good one at that there is someone even greater in their respective fields than those on this list that just haven't been properly recorded yet. And that goes for all on this list except maybe number 1. Nevertheless, Elucia Vane has, in her centuries of service, discovered numerous star systems and mapped entire new sectors of Imperial space. Few rogue trader dynasties can claim to have founded as many colonies as that of the Vane dynasty, and she has, herself, helped found more than a dozen new colonies. In her exploration, she has also found the most Prometheum-rich world found to date, and sent its coordinates to the Mechanicus, earning their eternal favor. In addition, in her journeys along the galactic rim, she has also been responsible for exterminating the xenospecies known as the Darlocks, as well as murdering a string of no doubt senseless normals serving as Imperial governors, which has grossed her a spot on the Inquisition's wanted for questioning list.
Well, I somewhat retract my previous statement. That is already quite impressive for a lone rogue trader. Such feats are normally reserved for tight-knit dynasties. Her success comes without obsession over blood purity, which makes it all the less pain-inducing to reflect on. Her choice of attire is also resplendent. Funny safari hat with big feathers, corset armor, big stomping boots, cane with a rapier in it, as well as a thick, excessive face veil. This is what Imperial aesthetic is all about. Death dressed in the guise of a well-to-do Quaintrell.
What? Quaintrell? Is this some kind of bird?
You could say that. If you are a humongous weirdo. Which you are. Number 9.
At number 9 we have Paeto Antius. Now, it is one thing to conquer a star system, and it is one thing to chart out new humongous swaths of space full of star systems. Or sectors, as they're known. But it is something completely different to conquer an entire sector. Admiral Paeto Antius of the Imperial Navy did this, however. He led Imperial fleets into what would become known as the Antian sector, named after his success. Previously, it was ruled by Xenos empires and lost human colonies. But, leading a massive force including Astartes, Mechanicus, and Militarum forces, he succeeded in turning the sector in its entirety over to Imperial rule.
Impressive.
For a while, at least.
Unsurprising.
A millennia after being conquered, this sector came under siege by a demon prince known as Corruptus.
What a hilariously vivid choice of name for a fucking demon prince.
Paeto Antius had at this point been lost due to a warp storm swallowing his ship, the Majestic Light, and he was lost, after which he was declared the patron saint of the sector. However, interestingly, his ship, the Majestic Light, returned a millennia after its disappearance, coming from out a warp rift that was, incidentally, opened up by Corruptus. Unfortunately, Antaeus has not yet been found, but considering the warp's fickleness with time, he could crop up eventually.
He had better. Until then, his success is acknowledged and admired. Number 8.
At number 8, we have Lord General Militant Drusus. Drusus was the second in command of the Angevin Crusade, named after Lord Militant Golgenna Angevin. The Angevin Crusade was a crusade launched in the hope of conquering a vast area of space in the Segmentum Obscurus, known as the Calyx Expanse. Angevin led millions of troops, titans, several chapters of Space Marines, and scores of ships from battle fleets of Segmentum Solar and Segmentum Obscurus. But during a particularly disastrous phase of the crusade, more troops died in only 4 years than had died in the last decades of the crusade. This left Angevin with a severe bout of depression.
I am consistently impressed when individuals at the very top of vast power structures have a good sense to actually feel bad when their plans end in the death of millions.
Yes, like you, my master.
Fuck you.
What?
Continue, sue her man.
With Angevin himself debilitated, Lord General Militant Drusus took over the crusade in his stead. And with Drusus at the helm, the crusade truly exploded in its efficiency. Drusus waged a fierce war against a species of Xenos known as the Uvoth, sorcerers and slavers in one, that held much of the sector in its grip, and in time managed to exterminate their homeworlds. Drusus managed to conquer the Calyx Expanse and claimed it for the Imperium, naming it the Calyxus sector. This, while also regularly being subjected to multiple assassination attempts by rivals who yearned for his role, none of which succeeded. In the end, his success became legend, and he has been hailed as a saint after his passing.
I can truly appreciate someone who can take the reins from where another fell and steer with purpose back onto the road, especially when said someone is not just driving a car, as this analogy is implying, but is indeed driving millions and millions of lives into galactic calamity. The slaughter of slavers is always appropriate as well, so bonus points. Next, please.
Number 7. Lord Castellan Usaka E. Creed. Creed is a Lord General of the Astra Militarum and the one leading the forces on the fortress world of Cadia. Born impoverished and adopted by a Cadian regiment after his family had been slaughtered by servants of chaos, he managed to climb to the top of the most integral Astra Militarum regiment in the galaxy past the Solar Militia, by sheer grit and determination alone.
Then he has already defeated an enemy harder to kill, and an easy no or servant of the gods. Nepotism.
Joining a crusade known as the Drossite Crusade, he was soon promoted to captain due to his mastery of strategy, coordination, and ability to command. After fending off a Hrod migration, an Eldar raid, even a powerful Chaos Lord serving under Abaddon the Despoiler, all of it served to grant him his rank, only prevented full authority by the sneering Cadian oligarchy, who wished not to have a lowborn brought into their echelons.
There is the obsession with blood purity again. Gross.
Yes. However, during a very recent incident, a blister of traitors broke out and managed to slaughter nearly the entirety of Cadian High Command and its officer corps. This battle has become known as the Battle of Tyrock Fields, and is the battle where Creed would take personal command of the shell-shocked Cadian forces, driving them to victory against those that would weaken the planet's defenses for the oncoming 13th Black Crusade. With this, however, Creed's political opponents have been forced to back down, giving Creed the paramount title of Lord Castellan of all Cadia, the one responsible for holding Abaddon away from the rest of the Imperium.
He will succeed. There can be no doubt. He will personally kick Abaddon in his ghastly radiator backpack, and his success will be cheered for countless millennia, and we will personally hang out, consume whiskey, and play card games.
I suppose that sounds only apt.
Next. Number 6.
At number 6, we have Saint Sabbat. Sabbat was born to a family of shepherds on an agri-world in a region of space that had not yet been conquered by the Imperium. Indeed, it was for the most part ruled by the ruinous powers and torturous Xenos. All humans who lived there lived their lives of livestock. Allegedly, she one day had a vision, given to her by you, my emperor. After this, using her uncanny and overwhelming charisma, she immediately began to rally the people of the planet. This revolution soon ballooned to a size greater than but an agri-world, as she was suddenly heading a full-blown crusade against their oppressors, leading colonial regiments, pilgrim retinues, ships in their thousands, sisters militant, and even hosts of space marines, all while achieving feats of leadership and strength that overshadow the vast majority of lord generals and war masters leading their own crusades. All this from a simple farmhand in the midst of a sector considered lost.
Amazing. I am certain some soul shard of my being thought it would be funny to help lead a small peasant girl into becoming a great revolutionary war hero and crusader queen. As always, I am correct, for it is as funny as it is wonderful.
Much like many previous entries on this list, she was, of course, declared a saint. However, the difference is she was declared a saint before she died. A living saint, as they are called. But she did still die, suffering the 9 holy wounds, as her followers called them.
Not certain what is so holy about a bunch of holes.
Upon the time of her demise, the sector she had conquered, now known as the Sabbat Worlds, was fully within realms of Imperial authority. She had succeeded in her self-appointed duty, and it is only unfortunate the stamped-out remnants of the enemy managed to fell her before their own destruction had fully come. This, however, does in no way negate how successful she truly was, thus landing her this spot on the list.
Consider her sacrifice recognized. Good job to everyone involved, including me. Next.
Number 5 is Drakan Vangorich. Now, this one might be a little bit contentious, and I'll go over why a bit later. Drakan Vangorich was the 12th Grand Master of Assassins of the official Assassin Order, active during Millennium 32.
I am contented to hear a High Lord, against all odds, actually made it onto a list such as this.
He was quite active during a war known as the War of the Beast, and I won't go into too much detail, but basically the High Lords were utterly incompetent at the time, perhaps more so than even now.
Impressive in all the wrong ways.
Vangorich, however, recognized this incompetence and held most of the High Lords in contempt. The High Lord's ineptitude led to constant issues during the War of the Beast, and once the war was over, still proved to be to the point of dangerous in their misconduct. So, Vangorich did what his order does best and assassinated the majority of them, during an event known as the Beheading, killing most of them in a single day, saving Terra and the rest of the Imperium from their continued corruption of its very core.
Fantastic. I would consider something similar being done today, but at this stage, this would also mean slaying the last remnant of Bulgo that we have left. Even I cannot bring myself to carry out such an order.
I still cry on the daily. Bulgo would make this list, but he was never bound by the shackles of normality. It is to the point of unfair to the rest on this list.
So what was the contentious part?
Well, whilst Vangorich did indeed help save Terra from despotism, he did also choose to rule the entire Imperium by creating a cabinet of puppets in the other High Lord's stead. Certainly this worked more than fine. Terra was healed of its wounds, a 4th founding of Astartes were born under his charge, and the Imperium's armies were bolstered to peak efficiency once again. All this during 80 years of his reign. However, as one might expect,
a single man cannot rule a shifting, screaming monolith like the Imperium without their minds coming undone.
After 80 years, irrationality took hold. He committed seemingly random massacres on the people of the Imperium. He too became a threat. He too was killed, however, and with fortune, before he could do any serious damage. Whilst the actions committed late in his life are unforgivable, I place him here for saving the entire Imperium from the far greater corruption and genocides that otherwise would have taken place.
It is sad. He could have been considered a hero, and nothing but to have sullied his legacy so. I understand why this placing is contentious. Next, please.
Well, at number 4, we have Alicia Dominica.
I go fastly from saddened to uncomfortable.
Oh, I was certain my presence would have been enough, as you have informed me time and time again.
Your brand of discomfort I am increasingly desensitized to. This one was quite different, like a massive psychic flame brought before my unmoving face.
But, she was also quite the great hero. Again, though slightly contentious.
Contentious is the word.
Alicia Dominica is the patron saint of the entire Adepta Sororitas. During the so-called Age of Apostasy, a man by the name of Goji Vandire...
I still cannot get over how a fucker with a name as blatantly evil vampire sounding as Gog Vandire managed to get anywhere close to the top of a power structure. But I suppose at this point it says more about the modern Imperium than anything else.
You could have made a fine blood angel, that's for sure.
Shut the fuck up, how fucking dare you say this, you sour fucking protein shaker. I am effectively distracted by the discomfort.
She was at first the leader of the Brides of the Emperor, who served as Goji Vandire's bodyguards. She had been recruited personally by Vandire once her order, previously known as the Daughters of the Emperor...
Daughters, oh no. Discomfort has reached maximum capacity.
Ew. Nevertheless, whilst she served Vandire loyally, as he lorded over Terra as undisputed master of the Imperium, the massive revolt that had sparked with Vandire's continued genocides of its people had finally come to Vandire's doorstep, and started slamming on his gate. As a war broke out over Terra, Alicia Dominica and her brides began preparing to defend Vandire and his palace to the bitter end, deeply entrenched and prepared for anything. Except one thing. The Adeptus Custodes, your very own companions, came from out the sanctum and brought Alicia Dominica into this very throne room.
It was markedly gross, even more so now. Your Captain General also gave her my favorite cup, which was amongst my most painful stuck on this throne moments.
I will make sure to let my brother know of this greatest failure. After returning from out the throne room, Alicia Dominica proceeded to slay Goji Vandire herself, immediately ending a war that could have destroyed Terra itself. After this, she would proceed to lay the foundations for the entire sisterhood, becoming the Adepta Sororitas, who persist to this day. She was also, of course, declared a living saint and spearheaded many crusades before her death at the Scourging of Friedschweit's world.
I'm glad I snapped her out of collaboration and snapped her into kingslaying. Founding a galaxy-spanning cabal of zealots is also, while not something I exactly don't loathe to my core, at the very least very impressive. Next please, discomfort subsists.
Next on our list, at number 3, we have Saint Celestine.
Oh boy, I recognize this one.
Now, Saint Celestine came from very humble origins. In fact, she even served as a Sister Repentia before her ascension. Repentia are excessively fanatical suicide troops who have been judged failures by the Adepta Sororitas codes of conduct, thus sent out to find penance in combat till they are deemed redeemed by fulfilling some arbitrary demand made up by their commanders, up to and often very much including their death.
I hate this with great force. Now tell me why it is worse than first impressions would infer.
Their garb is about as skimpy as ours.
How utterly vile. Why are all who seek penance before me compelled to remove their clothing?
My master, I recall you wishing pin-ups of yourself sent across the galaxy. I believe you know the answer to this.
Move on before I curse you.
Well, Celestine was a warrior in a crusade to retake the Palatine sector from a massive chaos incursion. She had fallen in combat, but not before personally slaying more than 100 traitors. However, once her body had been brought back, they realized that she had come back from certain death, all her wounds having mysteriously healed. She returned to the front and led her sisters to victory the day after her revival, killing the last of the traitors in but a few hours. After this, she was recognized as the figurehead of the entire crusade, and soon after spearheaded the entire crusade as a living saint, proceeding to reconquer the entire sector.
This is, of course, impressive. But I assume you have not yet gotten to the reason why she is above all the previous sector-conquering saints on this list.
Well, you see, this was not Saint Celestine's last act. She survived the conquering of this sector and went on many more wars of faith afterwards, which are like crusades but motivated and led entirely by the ecclesiarchy. She was slain after conquering vast swaths of space, but was, finally, put to death by the treasonous War Master of Thorax. Her death even reached Terra, the Tower of Heroes, tolling to mourn her sacrifice. However, more recently, she has suddenly reappeared. Indeed, Saint Celestine has proven to not be dead. Or, rather, that she has died, on multiple occasions in fact, but has returned each time to keep aiding the Imperium. So, not only has she successfully aided the people of the Imperium more than most others on this list, but she also defies death to keep doing so.
I have a feeling I know who is behind that.
Who, my Emperor?
If you cannot guess, I will not endow you an answer. Number 2.
At number 2, we have Lord Commander Solar Macarius. Macarius is the most successful Astra Militarum commander in history, bar none. To learn that someone managed to conquer more than he did in his lifetime would be, if not impossible, then at least well and truly astonishing. Macarius led the so-called Macarian Crusade, a campaign wherein he managed to conquer more worlds than anyone since the time of the Great Crusade. His campaign was vast and effective. He was able to compartmentalize and divvy out exactly all orders that had to be sent out to further the Crusade's goals. He often took part in battles personally and never lost a single war he waged. It is worth noting, however, that he was quite ruthless and cruel, but nonetheless very efficient. The one thing that stopped him from achieving further greatness was the cowardice of his fellow standard human normal. Macarius drove his crusade all through Segmentum Pacificus, so far he reached its very rim, bordering into the so-called Halo Zone, an area of space beyond the light of your Astronomicon. The notion of braving this frontier and conquering worlds lost to the Imperium horrified his troops. They refused his wish to continue, and so the Macarian Crusade was put to a halt, for its leader, in his ambition and spirit, had ascended too far past the rest of mankind.
A shame. I am sure I would have burned brighter knowing there were some souls braving the vast unknown in my name. Their fear, whilst perhaps understandable, is cause for sorrow. Who knows what terror humanity beyond the rim suffer? It is only right for us to bring our light to them. And by light I do not mean giant fucking bombs. It is time to stop assuming this.
Macarius perished soon after his dreams were dashed. Not in battle, of course, but of alleged disease. This, however, is not true, as he was in actuality assassinated. But this knowledge is deemed forbidden.
Inquisition.
Yes.
Fuck.
Macarius was naturally declared a saint, becoming one of the patron saints of the entire Imperial Guard, in fact. And he has gone down in history as the example to bring up when speaking of Imperial leadership. The most successful Imperial Guardsman ever. But not the most successful Imperial.
Exciting segue to the number 1 spot. Continue.
And at number 1, we have Sebastian Thor. Now, Sebastian Thor was no war hero. He did not conquer a sector, he did not fight to the death, he did not destroy an entire xeno species. He was a preacher, a small, simple, humble man, much like a lot of the other individuals on this list. During Goji Vendire's reign of blood, Sebastian Thor decided that the extreme oppression and wanton slaughter levied by the Imperium itself could no longer stand. So, he started a revolution on his home planet, quite successfully given how utterly sick everyone was of Vendire's despotism. Now, Sebastian Thor came to be the leader of the so-called Confederation of Light. The Confederation was not only a confederation officially, but also a cult, much like the Temple of the Savior Emperor, which was the religious institution in power at this time. The Confederation of Light did unfortunately worship you as a god, much like the Imperial cult has done for millennia. But the difference between the Confederation of Light and the Temple of the Savior Emperor was primarily ideological. The Temple was totalitarian, oppressive, and draconian. They put worth in class divisions which cardinals could live in luxury, excessive crusading so as to stop any defiance against what they allege is your will, and the purging of billions on arbitrary grounds such as spiritual uncleanliness. The Confederation, meanwhile, favored abolishing poverty, acting with humility, and not murdering people for fun. The fact that the Confederation contradicted the Temple's teaching so thoroughly had it officially declared a spiritual threat by the Ecclesiarch, and it was, in fact, declared a heretical cult, and soon after hunted down and purged by all forces the Ecclesiarch could muster. Later, during the Age of Apostasy, when Goji Vendire was in power, the Confederation would be reborn under the leadership of Sebastian Thor. Whilst of humble origins, Thor was supremely charismatic, and the Confederation would quickly find support. Goji Vendire recognized this threat and sent his religious military order, the Frateris Templars, to destroy both Thor and his homeworld. Now, my Emperor, chances are you had been, if anything, partially aware of this occurring at the time. For what happened next was what truly set Thor's revolution into full force. As the Frateris Templars tried to make it to Thor's home planet, the entire region within which the fleet hung was eradicated by a massive warp storm. This warp storm was named the Storm of the Emperor's Wrath, as it was widely considered to be your will made manifest.
Either that, or I had to absorb something spicy.
Fun fact, this storm is still going on to this day. That is how explosive it was.
Could have been offered a spoon of Martian Reaper sauce by whoever was caretaker at the time.
This checks out. Support for Sebastian Thor and the Confederation of Light boomed much like the warp storm had. In fact, in the upcoming years, the entire Segmentum Obscurus would become embroiled in revolution and start disposing of the rich, horrid cardinals serving Vendire. Declaring Vendire a heretic, Sebastian Thor would soon lead a Segmentum-wide armada towards Terra to put an end to Vendire's reign. This massive campaign was never officially called a crusade, but would have easily been the vastest crusade in terms of manpower since the Horus Heresy, if considered. In fact, not only did Thor manage to rally the people of the Imperium, but even the Adeptus Mechanicus and Space Marines of many chapters, all easily convinced by the idea that Vendire must be deposed. Of course, as you might expect, this led directly to the siege of the Ecclesiarchal Palace, the enlightenment of Alicia Dominica, who was number 4 on this list, and the death of Goji Vendire. After this, Thor worked closely together with the Astartes, the Mechanicus, and of course, the Custodes, to give order back to the persecuted people of Terra. Now, Thor was still technically considered a heretic by Imperial law, and thus he was arrested by the Arbites. A trial was held, and tired of all this shit, our Captain General at the time, Excelsior, would aid him in his deliverance from bureaucratic incompetence. Sebastian Thor would later become the new Ecclesiarch. He first refused the title, but Excelsior took him aside and allegedly told him that he would leave Terra as Ecclesiarch or never leave at all. Thor was convinced, and he was appointed Ecclesiarch, to the joy of pretty much everyone, except all the rich cardinals who yet lived. Thor would, after this, travel the galaxy and do his best to reform the Adeptus Ministorum, removing the influence of the temple and replacing it with the tenets of the Confederation. Now, if he succeeded in converting the Ecclesiarchy into a nice, humble, merciful organization...
No.
You may judge for yourself.
In the end, after a lifetime of work attempting to reshape the entire Imperium into something truly better, he would return to Terra at the very young age of 102, where he would then die. Now, leading the largest revolution in history, saving the Imperium from itself, and having the largest effect on not only the Ministorum, but the power structure of the entirety of the Adeptus Terra that any one man has had since the Great Crusade, he definitely deserves his place at number 1.
Yes. We should go ahead and raise him from the dead so that I may give him a pat on the back, and then send him back to work because he clearly died too early, and died a slacker. Come on, only 112 years old, fuck. With some quality rejuvenation treatments he could have at least lasted another 200. Where's his body at? We must have it necromanced immediately.
Slight problem. His head is missing.
Why? Did one of the other ecclesiarchs turn it into a gold-plated cup to piss into?
No, it was allegedly stolen by a Necron.
What the fuck? Why?
He wanted it for his big metal skeleton museum, allegedly.
Oh. All the more reason to go on a raid, it seems.
That's it for the list, though. What did you think, my Emperor?
I cannot believe I am as not unimpressed as I actually am. My torment has been alleviated for but a moment.
Remember to like, favorite, and subscribe.
No, I will instead punch you.
What?